My name is Mary Williams, and on behalf of the Marfa and Presidio County Museum Association, I would like to welcome you to today's talk, which we feel will be most entertaining as well as educational by the man who many have called Mr. Marfa, Mr. Brit Webb. For those of you who are not familiar with the museum, it is located in the historic Humphreys building, which is right on West San Antonio Street. It's right in the middle of town. And it currently is only open 12 hours a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday from 1 to 5. But we invite all of you, if you've not been there, or if you've not been there in the past maybe 6 or 8 months, you might want to come by because we do have some new things. This afternoon, it's my pleasure to introduce Brit Webb, and I'm sure he really doesn't need any kind of an introduction. Brit first came to Marfa in 1943 to work for Webb Brothers at their Gulf Station, which is now Marfa Contemporary. He graduated from Marfa High School in 1949, and he served in the Air Force for 4 years during the Korean War. While in the Air Force, he married Laura Alexander. They were married for 58 years, and they adopted 4 children. Brit came back to Marfa after his service, and he received an undergraduate and graduate degree from Sul Ross University, as well as an administrative degree from Texas Tech. He spent 5 years as a teacher, elementary school principal, and high school principal in Marfa before moving on to Valentine, where he was superintendent for many years. All in all, Brit spent 30 years in education. And after retiring, he returned to Marfa, where he opened Brit Webb Service Station and was in business for another 30 years. Brit is now one of the most popular substitute teachers in the Marfa school system, and he was recently elected to the Marfa City Council. He's going to talk about Marfa, what it was like when he first came, and the changes that he has seen over the past 74 years. And he will also share with you some of his thoughts about what he sees for the future of Marfa and some of the challenges that he feels the city will face and is facing. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Marfa, Mr. Brit Webb.
Thank you, Mary. Is that better? I started by telling you that I went to a new school district in Imperial, Texas, and as high school principal. And the first Sunday, went to a Pentecostal church on Sunday night. Didn't know anybody. Thought I ought to go and, make a good impression. Was the only church in town. And the preacher said, would anybody like to give a testimony? And my son Robert said, my dad would. They said, you're on, Mr. Webb. So I got up and did that. And then I asked Robert later, why? Why did you do that? He said, well, you always want to talk. So here I am. I first came to Marfa visiting, and my brothers had a business, Webb Brothers Sinclair. And that's where the radio station is at present. And that was a long time ago, but the logo was a dinosaur named Denny. I always had those in front of the Sinclair stations. And when they moved down to the Gulf Station where the red light is, why, I believe they were there 37 years, and I moved out here from a farm in east of Abilene, Clyde, Texas, and went to work for them, and I doubt that I started out very good at it, but I learned a little along the way from my brothers. I have always felt like that I was real fortunate to move here when so many of the original ranchers and families were still here and in business. The ranching business was different then in that the cattle were shipped by train, and of course we had cattle pens here, and Valentine had cattle pens, and so did a lot of other places between here and Iowa. And I can't remember very much about last week, but I can remember Mr. Courtney Mallard sent trainloads of Highland Herefords to Letts, Iowa, to Turkington Brothers feedlots. And some of the cowboys had to ride those trains and go with them. And I always thought that would have been an interesting trip, but I never did make it. But some of the big ranches today have been sold and divided. It's a whole lot different country than it was then. But when I moved here, of course, World War II was raging, and we had a division at Fort D.A. Russell, and twin-engine flying school east of town, and lots of people and lots of excitement. After the war, both bases closed, and Marfa went way down. It's always been a good place to live so far as I was concerned. And I quit school when I was in the 7th grade. My dad had a sunstroke, and I quit and helped my mother on the farm. I come from a family of 7 boys and 6 girls, 8 boys, count me. But I was the oldest boy at home when my dad had a stroke, and so I quit school and went to work. Picked lots of cotton and did a lot of other things. But I came to Marfa to work for my brothers. My brother Bascom said, why don't you start high school? And I said, I never did finish grade school. He said, well, go up there and see if the principal will let you start. I said, well, I'll be 21 years old when I got out. And he said, yes, you're going to be 21 anyway. and that made some logic to me. And I went up and talked to the principal, and he said, yes, I could just start out as a freshman. But I started the year I should have graduated. I'd have never made it, except I had fallen in love with a wonderful girl, and she encouraged me and said, we could see each other every day. And that was good and singing. So I did go to school, and I was treated extremely well, and kids treated me good, and the teachers treated me good. And when I finished high school, my brother Bascom said, well, you want to go to college? And I said, no, I think I better just go to work, and I'll see what happens. And so I worked a while, and the Korean War started, and that's what happened. I went in the Air Force for 4 years, and I stationed at Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I was surprised that the air base there used to be Fort D.A. Russell. They wanted to name it after a Wyoming senator, F.E. Warren, so they moved Fort D.A. Russell to Marfa, the name. But that was the wintertime in Cheyenne is not ideal. And oftentimes they put the city of Cheyenne off limits because the cowboys and the airmen met and fought in those local bars. So for entertainment, we had to go to Denver or Greeley or somewhere down the line. And I went to Greeley and had a blind date with a little girl from Iowa. I told her, nothing serious, I'm just passing by. And 6 months later, I was in California. I was transferred to California. And I called her and said, if you'd like to get married, I'll come get you. She said, come soon, we'll get married in California. And that lasted 58 years, so that's not bad. She taught school in Folsom while I went to Japan for a year and a half, and I came back and there were 3,000 of us on the ship. She was the only one that met the ship, and when it stopped, she was directly below me. And she hollered, hello, darling, and 3,000 guys looked. A highlight of her life. We moved back to Marfa after I got out of the service, and I worked again at Webb Brothers. And she had gone back to Greeley and got her teaching certificate, and she was a homemaking teacher. So we bought a little house here and got ready to live here, and there was no homemaking job open, so she got a job in Fort Davis. But they required us to live there. And I told her I wouldn't move to Fort Davis if they gave it to me. And she sat down and started crying, and I said, I bet we'll like Fort Davis. So we spent a year over there before a job opened up here. And I went back, I started So Ross and worked at Webb Brothers again and got a business degree. The superintendent come to see me and wanted me to teach a self-contained 5th grade. And I said, I'm not a teacher, I can't do that. And he said, go up there and look at the class. And I went up there and Miss Queenie Steen was substituting. They had to divide the class. And this one was over in the ag building, and 23 little kids sitting there eager. And I walked in and Miss Steen picked up her stuff, and I said, don't leave, I'm just visiting. And she said, you better be teaching, I'm gone. So I started out teaching 5th grade and going to So Ross, trying to get education classes where I know what I was doing. And kind of got started, and then the superintendent came along. Mr. Adams said, oh yes, and you'll be coaching junior high girls. I said, I've never seen junior high girls play. He said, just give them some exercise. First game we had a basketball over in Alpine, we just got slaughtered. And I went back to see him and I said, it seemed like the parents and the kids didn't think this exercise was enough. He said, you'll get the hang of it. So I did that for 15 years, so I got the hang of it. But my second year, I went to junior high school and junior high principal, and I don't know about those kids, but I sure learned a lot pretty quick. I introduced one of my sisters to Esther Ann White the other day, and I said, this little girl I taught in junior high, and she said, you didn't teach me anything. You look good standing in front of the class. And I said, well, I taught you to be honest. But the truth is that we went back to 40-something kids in that class, and the top 10% were very good. The bottom 10% were very bad. Tried to teach to the middle, and it was a challenge. So I think Hester Ann was probably telling the truth that it was my 5th year I went to high school as high school principal, and I only had to teach one class, typing, and my years in Marfa school were great. And I get to see some of those students almost every day. And yesterday was my birthday. I was 89. And I heard from a lot of those students. I sure did appreciate it. When I moved to Marfa, it was highly segregated. We had 2 elementary schools, 2 Catholic churches, 2 Methodist churches, 2 Baptist churches, 2 theaters, and so on. We also had a lot more businesses than what we do today. I was looking at the amount of automobile dealerships right after the war. We had 8 automobile dealers in Marfa. We sold cars to Presidio, Valentine, Fort Davis. But we had Casner Motor Company, where the city offices are, sold Buicks and Chevrolets, GMC. Webb Brothers, where Marfa Contemporary is, we had Studebakers and Jeeps, and a few Packards. W.B. Johnson had where Ballroom Marfa is, sold Fords. Had Head and Jones that had the part of Ike Livingston's place that faces the street that way. Sold Dodge and Plymouth. Had Herschel Horde sold Chryslers where Marfa Country Clinic is today. Pete Williams had a Oldsmobile place right across from the Bicenter Hotel. Shamali Brothers sold Kaisers and Frasers, and that's where the get-go is. Jim Chancey had an international place where the Thunderbird is. And Eddie Pierce sold Pontiacs wherever he wanted to park them. He later, of course, bought out Ford, bought out Chevrolet, and built a place where they still have across from the Thunderbird. The truth is that after the war, Marfa began to change pretty fast because there just wasn't that much for people to do. We ended up with lots of empty buildings and lots of empty businesses. And about the time I went into the Air Force, Donald Judd started art stuff in Marfa. We've been on the upswing. And now a lot of us, people that have lived here a long time and so forth, as our valuations go up, I don't know what's going to happen to us, but it sure has been good for the town. Looks a whole lot better. Mary mentioned that I had substituted at the high school the last couple of years. Well, elementary too. Has been a great pleasure. Kids, I didn't know how they'd react to someone my age substituting. But I told them I'd been a teacher and a principal and superintendent, and we just have school, and they've been great. First time I ate in the cafeteria, I sat by the table by myself, and a senior girl come over and said, "Would you like to sit with us?" And I said, "I would." They've just treated me like that from then on, and it's been a real good pleasure to get to know some of the kids that are in the school now. Of course, I came back and went into business after I was a teacher. I went into business with my brother Bill, and he had a shop and a station, and I took the station and sold tires and batteries and so forth, and he did all the mechanic work. And I really enjoyed doing that, but it was vastly different than being a superintendent. A lot harder work, and I slept a lot better. Didn't have to worry about a lot of things I did in the school business, but I intended to do it 2 or 3 years till my 2 youngest kids got out of high school, and sure enough, I did it for 30 years. And had some great customers, and a lot of them of people that I had taught and, or worked with, and ranch people that I'd known for a long time. And I was just fortunate to get to work with a lot of good people. I'd like to talk a little bit about present-day Marfa. Some of you that have been here a while know that we've had some vast changes. And most of them been good. After I lost my wife and a daughter, I thought, well, I can stay home and cry a lot, or I can get out and do stuff. And so I made a resolution to have more fun than anybody in Marfa. And I'm right up there. But to do that, you got to go places where the people are. And we have people coming to Marfa from everywhere. And thank goodness a lot of them were pretty girls. One of my ex-students, Dr. Nancy Stover, got on Facebook and wondered why I had all pictures of just pretty girls. Aren't there any boys that come to Marfa? I said, well, I haven't noticed them, and most of them don't dance, and so I have a nephew in Iowa said, looks like you spent a lot of time in taverns. Well, at night, that's where the people are. And I told him I just had soft drinks, but I sure meet a lot of good people from everywhere. It's unbelievable to me that, you know, we have so many people come from Dallas and Austin and Houston. And I was 3 young people, Oriental types, the other day. I saw them at the hotel. I was, where do you live? And they said, Boston. I said, you grew up in Boston? Well, no, I grew up in Korea. I grew up in Japan. And I've met people from New Zealand, England, Italy, all over the world. So that's what we're facing these days. I had a friend the other day giving me suggestions for the city council. We need to make crosswalks and then make them walk in them. I said, that would be a real challenge. You know, they stand in the middle of the street, take pictures of a courthouse, and I don't blame them. We got the prettiest courthouse in the country. And I don't mind slowing down for them or going around them. Bicycles do worry me because if they zip right through a stop sign, you know, sooner or later someone's going to get run over, I guess. But I was looking yesterday, the big old tour buses sitting there at the Hotel St. George. And we've had some good bands and music at that St. George Hall, as good as you'd hear anywhere. And a swimming pool that I was sitting there the other evening just wondering, how in the world did we get lucky enough to have a pool like that? And so we're improving and getting a lot of good things. And some people, it aggravates them of how the tour's stacked. But if you're in business, I don't imagine that's a problem, you know. On a weekend, I could have told that lady that Cosmico wouldn't work, you know. Nobody's gonna sleep in them tents and those trailers. It's full every weekend. Even in the wintertime, you know, I see them come in the cafe and I said, did you stay at Cosmico? Yeah. How was it? It's great. So, in the same way with bicycles, you know, they put bicycles around. Nobody's going to ride around Marfa on bicycles, and they're going here and there and everywhere all the time, you know. So we're still changing, is what I'm saying, and it's just kind of hard to get used to, but I think that's what our future looks like. And if somebody paints those crosswalks, I'm sure not going to volunteer to try to make people walk in them. That is definitely going to be a challenge. As my son Robert told those people over in Imperial that my dad liked to talk. I couldn't deny it. And Mary asked me to do this, and I said, oh yeah, I can do that. And I kind of thought we was going to have a smaller group and a little different. But I want to say a little bit about the museum. I think that Ms. Lee Bennett was teaching history when I was principal at Marfa High School, and she had students to record their parents or grandparents or whoever they wanted to interview and make a recording of. And those are in the Marfa Library. And they kids did a good job. And then from that, some got interested in museum. And you know, we have, I don't know how many of you maybe haven't visited our museum, but it's excellent. It tells our history pretty good, you know, from the ranching and mining days to the present. Of course, the military. We have some major problems with the building. It's a historical building, Adobe, and one side of it is dropped down a little bit. And we've had somebody just recently looking at it to see what we can do to stabilize it. But it's going to cost some money to do it. But the building is well worth saving. It's a good historical building and it's well built. We have a water problem in that too much water close to the building. So we got to get something to get that water away from the building, and we got some people looking how to do that now. And of course, I have no idea why the city quit helping the museum, but a year or two ago they did, and the museum had to depend on the thrift store. And that's just not enough, especially to do repairs, and especially major repairs. So I'm going to insist that some of we had a meeting last week on hotel motel taxes, and the museum should be included in that. I've had people, when I was looking at the building, they stopped and they want to see inside, but it's not open except just a few days because of the cost. So we ought to change some of that to go along with the changing of the times. And the same group of people probably that go to Planet Marfa and Lost Star Saloon may not be the one to go to the museum, but we have older people come that are very interested in that. And we have some great history that is preserved there and that people ought to be able to see. So I'm looking forward to us making some repairs and having that museum open more than what it is now. And we need some more people. I met with that board a while back, and we just have a few ladies keeping that thing going, and that's not enough. We need some other people, we need some young people that are interested in, will help preserve that history that we have. You've noticed that the last 2 days, last couple of weeks, we've been one of the coolest spots in Texas. Wow, we're fortunate to live in such a good place. I have a house in Round Rock, and a year or two ago I'd go down there and I'd go to mow the yard early every morning. You never did cool off in the night. Going early every morning didn't happen. Here it sure is different. The only thing that worries me a little bit is if all them people that visit us find out how good it is, we may have a lot more people moving here. And we do have some all the time fixing up some of these old adobes, and hopefully some people are going to be building some new places. We're just kind of running out of housing. And what we have, those of you that own a house, it's worth more than it was last year. It's sure worth more than it was 10 years ago. So what I'm saying is we're real fortunate. We just need some good planning for the next few years. I got on the city council, I thought, well, I've made budgets. I've worked with lots of people, and so maybe I can do some good on there. And I thought it would be interesting. And I'm not sure about doing the good anymore, but it sure is interesting. So I plan to be doing it for a while. I enjoyed talking to you. I hope I've given a little history that was of interest to you. And if you hadn't been able to tell, I sure do love this place we live. Thank you. Oh, you said answers, questions?
Yeah. We'd like to have a question and answer period, but before we do that, I wanted to introduce the people that are on the board of the Marfa and Presidio County Museum. Maggie Marcus is our president. Well, I don't know where she went now. She's here. Esther Sanchez, Alberto Garcia, Brittany Bass, Donna DeMore, who had been on the board and is a returning board member, and then Rosa Baeza from the bank. And me, too. Do we have any questions? You know, Brit has a lot of stories. All you have to do is go to the Dairy Queen at 3 o'clock every day, and you will hear some of the most fascinating stories. So I am sure some of you must have some questions. Yes?
Did you drive a bunch of kids up to New York in a station wagon once?
Did you drive a bunch of kids up to New York in a station wagon once?
I did.
You did? Tell them.
Actually, we took a station wagon and my Chrysler. And Valentine has a, what you call a travel class every 2 years, juniors and seniors. Not ever very many kids, but they work for 2 years. They take some great trips. While I was there, I took them to Mexico City once, to the Bahamas once, and to New York once, and to the great parks in the West once. And, it was lots of fun to take kids that hadn't been anywhere. I had a senior boy that had never ordered in a cafe. I ordered for him, and after a few days, he said, I can do my own order. And I said, okay, and we were in Salt Lake City, and breakfast time, and he told the waitress, I want 2 eggs. She said, how you want them? He said, turn them around. She looked at me, and I said, he wants them over easy. But by the time we got back, he knew how to order. But, of course, you work with kids, and it's so much fun to see them develop and learn. And some of them, you wonder what's going to happen to them. And out there on my tombstone, it said, to teach is to touch a life forever. And I think that's the truth. And I mentioned that in an article in the paper one day. Nancy Stover wrote me the sweetest letter. The ways I had touched her life. And that's true of a lot of kids. And they touched mine too. We had a good time in New York. And everywhere else.
Are there any other questions? Any more questions? Well, you can visit with Brit. We have refreshments. And actually, one of our board members, Brittany Bass, made some cookies out of Brit's wife's cookbook. So, oh, yeah.
Just a comment. My wife and I live in Houston. We've been kind of here for years. We met Mr. Webb in the Dairy Queen. Go and establish a relationship. Reached out to us, strangers in town, greeted us. We become friends. We're here today just to see him because of strangers. He just reached out. And here we are. He didn't know us from Adam's house cat. We've become friends and appreciate his friendship because kind of person.
I'll have to tell you one more little story. Had a teacher sent Clayton Bedell to the office. He was a first grader in Valentine. She sent him to the office for using bad language. I said, what do you mean talking like that? He said, it's instinct. I said, what is instinct? He said, that's what little ducks have that don't have to learn to swim. That's pretty good for a first grader. I saw him a couple of weeks ago at his birthday. He's riding a horse in the mountains in Colorado. I asked him, how's your instinct? He's on Facebook. He said, it's still good.
Thank you very much. Please join us. We have lots of refreshments, okay? And they're all in the back. And Brit will be there if you have questions, or he may share some other stories with you.